Hello everyone, let's try straight into integrating Dataverse and Power Automate into topics. The formal definition of this integration is the process of connecting your AI agent to your business's central data repository and automation engine to allow the agent to perform real-time data lookups and execute background tasks. In plain everyday English, it's giving your agent access to the company's filing cabinet and a set of hands to do the work. Imagine your agent is a new receptionist. If they can only talk, they can tell a customer the office hours. But if you give them the keys to the filing cabinet, Dataverse, and show them how to use the fax machine, Power Automate, they can suddenly tell a customer exactly where their order is and send them a receipt. Stay with me here because an agent that can't touch your data is just a chatterbox. We want a doer. You've probably seen this at the office, where you ask a question and someone says, "Let me go check the system." Well, we are teaching the agent to check the system itself. Let's break this down together. We are moving from just talking to actually helping. So now that we've mastered the idea that our agent needs to be a doer, you might be wondering how the agent actually asks for that information from the database. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is input variables and action nodes. This brings us to action nodes and input variables. The technical documentation defines an action node as a conversational step that triggers an external process, while input variables are the specific pieces of data, like an email or order ID, passed from the conversation into that process. To speak naturally, it is handing over the key. Before the agent can look up an order, it needs to know which order. Imagine a dummy example of a local repair shop. A customer says, "Is my laptop fixed?" The agent can't just guess. It first has to ask, "What is your ticket number?" When the customer types 555, the agent stores that 555 in a variable. Then it hits the action node and says, "Hey Power Automate, take this 555 and find out the status." You've probably noticed at the office how annoying it is when you give someone your ID and they ask for it again 2 minutes later. Input variables make sure the agent remembers the key you just handed over. Let's break this down together. We are preparing the instructions for our digital assistant. So now that we've mastered how to hand over the key, you might be wondering what happens behind the scenes when the assistant actually goes into the filing cabinet to find the answer. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is creating the Power Automate flow for Dataverse retrieval. Now we need to talk about the Dataverse retrieval flow. The formal definition says this is a Power Automate cloud flow triggered by Copilot that uses the getRowById or listRows action to query the Dataverse environment and return specific record details back to the agent. In simple everyday English, it's the runner. The agent stays on the screen talking to the customer while the flow runs to the back room, opens the Dataverse drawer, finds the right folder, and reads the information. Think of a dummy example. You have a table in Dataverse called membership. The flow takes the email address from the agent, looks through the membership table, and finds that the customer has a gold status. The flow then runs back to the agent with that gold status written on a note. Stay with me here because this happens in a heartbeat. You've probably seen this at a restaurant when the waiter goes to the kitchen to see if the chef has any more chocolate cake. The flow is that waiter. Let's break this down together. We are connecting the conversation to the source of truth. So now that we've mastered how the runner finds the information in the filing cabinet, you might be wondering how they actually tell the agent the answer, so the agent can tell the customer. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is output parameters and returning values to Copilot. This brings us to output parameters. The technical documentation defines these as the data values sent back from a completed Power Automate flow to the Copilot agent, allowing the agent to use that information in its next conversational response. In plain language, it is the answer on the note. Once the flow finds the data in Dataverse, it has to return it. Imagine a dummy example of a shoe store. The customer asked, "Do you have these boots in size 10? The flow went to Dataverse, saw that there are 3 in stock, and now it passes that number 3 back to the agent as an output parameter. Now the agent can say, "Good news, we have 3 pairs left in size 10. You've probably noticed at the office how great it feels when someone gives you a clear, direct answer instead of "I'll get back to you." Output parameters provide that instant satisfaction. Let's break this down together. We are closing the loop between the brain and the mouth. So now that we have mastered how the agent gets the answer back from the backroom, you might be wondering how to make that answer look pretty and helpful instead of just a raw number or code. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is using dynamic content in message nodes. Let's dive into dynamic content for responses. The formal definition describes the use of variables returned from an action to populate a message node, allowing the agent to provide personalized and context-aware replies to the user. To put it very simply, it is filling in the blanks. You don't want your agent to sound like a robot that just says 3. You want it to sound like a person. Imagine a dummy example. Instead of just saying the status of a repair, you use the customer name and status variables to say, "Hi Sachin, I've checked our system and your laptop is ready for pickup." You've probably noticed at the office how much better it feels when someone uses your name and gives you the specific details you asked for. That is the power of dynamic content. Stay with me here because this is the people pillar, making technology feel human. Let's break this down together. We are using our smart data to build a warm relationship with the user. So now that we've mastered how to give a smart, personalized answer, you might be wondering how to handle those times when the runner goes to the back room and finds out that the folder is empty or the customer doesn't exist. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is conditional logic and handling empty results. Finally, we reach error handling and empty results. This technical area involves using condition nodes in Copilot Studio to check if the variables returned from Power Automate are empty or null, allowing the agent to provide an alternative helpful response. In our relaxed classroom tone, it simply means the OOPS plan. In my 25 years, I have seen that things aren't always perfect. If a customer types the wrong order ID, the flow won't find anything. If we don't have a plan, the agent might just freeze. We build a path that says, if the status is empty, say, "I'm sorry, I couldn't find an order with that number. Would you like to try again?" Imagine a dummy example. You're looking for your keys. If they aren't on the table, you don't just stand there forever. You go check the couch. That is exactly what we are teaching our agent to do. Let's break this down together. As builders, we are making our agents resilient and patient. We've looked at the filing cabinet and the hands, handing over the keys with variables, the runner in the back room, the answer on the note, filling in the blanks for the user, and finally, the OOPS plan for missing data. We've mastered integrating Dataverse and Power Automate. You now know how to make your agent a truly intelligent, data-driven professional. Well, that brings us right into our next chapter.